Hello, thank you for joining me for this review of The Grey King, which is the fourth in the Dark is Rising series by Susan Cooper. So The Grey King, the fourth one, won a Newbery Award for Children's Literature, which is an American award. It apparently also won the Tir Na Nog Awards, which I'm probably mispronouncing, which is a Children's Literary Awards set in Wales. And it was a fairly worthy fourth in the series. I would strongly recommend against trying to read this without having read at least numbers 2 and 3, but preferably 1, 2, and 3. The beginning of this book, which is a very new edition, starts with a note from the author, which does recap a little bit what happened in book 2 when Will Stanton was introduced. But mostly this introduction talks about Wales. And the Grey King is clearly the reason why I always associated Will Stanton with Wales and thought that he actually lived in Wales. He doesn't. He lives in Buckinghamshire in the Thames River Valley. Or that's the impression I get from the books that I've read, not knowing the geography of the area well. However, in The Grey King takes place in Wales, and some of the Celtic and Arthurian legends and mythology that have occurred in previous books really come to the fore here. That's probably why I remember this book this well. I've been fascinated by Wales and Welsh for a long time. And in the note from the author, it mentions Will and the background to the Dark is Rising series up to now, but it really gushes about the Wales of the book, which is a part of the Gwynedd, I think it's pronounced, region of Wales, and how she talks about how much she knows it and how much she's loved it. She's got family rooted there. And she talks about how the mountains surrounding the mountain Cader Idris, which is haunted country, and she clearly loves it. Her love of that country comes through in this book significantly. Now that hill is in Welsh means the seat of Arthur, and there's a whole heap of other places, real and not real, and she describes them. The most interesting one being a 7th century stone 5 feet high engraved with the oldest Welsh in the world in St Cadfan's Church, which is where Susan Cooper's great-grandmother was baptized. So there's a lot of fascinating Welsh stuff. And for me, that's a very big strength of this book. It is also, I've got to say, one of its significant weaknesses. Now, how that works is we start off with Will Stanton. In the previous book, that was 2 books ago. In one of the previous books, he got to read a book which basically activated all his old one knowledge, magical ability, a whole heap of stuff. And in the last one, in Greenwich, when he and the other children, Simon, Jane, and Barney, recovered the Grail, he reads the Grail along with 2 other old ones, and that knowledge is imprinted in his brain. In The Dark is Rising, number 4, The Grey King, we start off with him ill in bed and having had such a high fever that he has forgotten the knowledge that he knows that he needs to have. He's confused, he's upset by it. Bad stuff. We don't know how he fell ill until later, but as a result of him being ill, his parents decide to send him away to stay with his aunt, I think it's Aunt Jen, in Wales, which brings us back to Wales. His sister Mary stayed there after an illness previously, and she recovered really well, so off Will goes to Wales, and I love that bit. I think it sounds like a magical country, and I hope to visit again one day. And Susan Cooper clearly loves it just as much. Now, getting there, Will is settling into the farm, and he meets this strange boy who lives on the farm called Bran. Bran, I gather, is about his age, and I'm assuming that Will Stanton is 12 by now, not 11, because there's an awful lot that's happened to him since his 11th birthday. So he meets Bran, who is an albino, and who speaks Welsh, and has this amazing dog called Cadfan, who has silverish eyes, so that means that he's more than just a dog. He's some in some way connected with the wild magic or the high magic or maybe the old ones. Now Bran can play the harp, which is a useful plot builder in this book. And there's a whole lot about Bran that makes him a really interesting secondary character after Will. Will has never been portrayed as a particularly vibrant character, and I think that's one of his strengths. Where Susan Cooper's love of Wales brings down the enjoyment factor of this book, though, is after the two of them meet. Because Bran starts listening Will on how to pronounce things in Welsh, and while a part of me loved reading that, Welsh is hard, and it's always good to get reinforcements of things that you have learnt, like diolch, like boreda. Those sorts of words and phrases and pronunciation of W being U, all those things are good to know, but they're good to know from Silver Platter or maybe from Duolingo while you're learning a language. If you've got several pages worth of a book that are basically lessoning you on how to pronounce things, I can see why she did it. She wanted people to be able to pronounce the words in their head correctly instead of incorrectly. She wanted a little bit more of that amazing Welsh knowledge infused out into the world. Now, by the time she wrote this Grey King, Susan Cooper was very definitely living in America, so that extra knowledge was probably that much more important. It slows the plot down. It means that the narrative, instead of flowing, stops right there while the reader is lessoned and schooled like a child. And I will say the Grey King has felt like the most young of the books that I've read so far. Now, I don't by any means hate it. I enjoyed it. It would probably be an easy 5-star if it was a standalone with similar problems. But because it's the fourth in the series and I've really enjoyed the previous 3, I can't help comparing it with the other ones. This is one of the reasons why I very rarely read a whole series without breaks in the middle, because I do find myself getting more and more critical as I go in. Now, after Will and Bran meet up, they find that there's some weird stuff happening in the area. Caer Idris is the home of the Grey King, and there's a mist that rises that's known by the locals as the Grey King's breath. And Will, as an old one, can sense that there is a bad guy from the dark side of the dark versus light, who's inhabiting the area and blanketing everything with his intent. Here again, Will goes on a bit of a mission. This time with Bran, he goes under the mountain and he finds a golden harp. It's all pretty amazing. It's a good under the mountain mission. Reading them all sequentially, I can see a few tactics that Susan Cooper seems to use in every single book except the first one. There's that high magic, high investment plot followed by a bit of more trivia, and then back and forth again. So Bran and Will go under the mountain. They retrieve the next thing required in this quest for the light to refute dark's rising. It's a harp. Will needs to use this harp to raise the 6 sleepers in the area, and slowly Bran's fascinating history is revealed, why he's there, who he is. He's a little bit strange from the beginning, and he's already linked to the old ones. I really don't want to spoil any of this book, because in this one, more than in some of the other ones, the actual plot, it has the ability to be spoiled. So yeah, enough of that. It's a good book. If you're reading the series, definitely go on to number 4 with a certain level of expectation and enjoyment, especially if you're interested in Wales and Welsh and Arthurian mythology. If you have not read the previous books, I would really strongly recommend that you don't read this one until you have read at least 2 and 3, but possibly 1, 2, and 3. Now, I'm going to go straight on to the last one, 5th. This may or may not work well for me. I may become even more super critical than I have been over this book. Because I did not have a book of my own, which I thought I did, but I couldn't find it on the shelf, I ended up getting mine from the library. I hate to think that I'm judging a book by its cover, but I've got a feeling that this cover is a good portion of why I didn't really bond with this book. It's good art of its kind. It's a very specific kind. The color illustration was done in 2023 by Justin Hernandez. I'm guessing that Justin Hernandez is definitely in that anime style of art. I like anime. I read a fair bit of it. I used to watch a lot of it. But this version of Will Stanton just makes me think that it was left over from an illustration for Frodo the Hobbit. And both he and Bran and the Golden Elf, what's with those ears? They both have elf ears. And not even proper elf ears, like those huge clunky plastic things you can buy at a Renaissance Festival or Comic-Con and stick them on and you look ridiculous. This looks ridiculous. I sort of winced every time I saw the cover. And I don't know if this influenced me in thinking that this was the more childish of the books. I really hope not. But in general, in the same way that the figures on the cover don't look like mature 11 or 12-year-olds, but like about 7 or 8-year-olds in an anime with squeaky voices, large portions of this book to me did feel young. And I'm not alone on this, because having finished this, I read a few other reviews to see what other people thought. First of all, The Grey King is more contemporary children's fantasy than the first one, Over Sea Under Stone, was. Despite being more contemporary, it's more contemporary also in that way that it feels a little bit like it's talking down to you, which might be fine for a 10-year-old reader. It's less good for an old reader. And where all the rest of the series works perfectly well for an adult, this one is, I can see some adult readers thinking it was too young for them. Other people have thought the same thing as well. I would say that The Grey King is far more on a par with books The Dark is Rising. And maybe that's Will Stanton himself. But Greenwich also felt like it had more maturity, more age, more mythology in it. It really got down to the nitty-gritty of mythology and how it's been incorporated into the modern day. Whereas The Grey King felt very much like it was writing an adventure story for young people which referenced mythology. Still a good book. Loved the Welsh parts. The Dark is Rising battle of dark versus light, which is the overall theme of The Dark is Rising, it still worked well. It was at times inconsistent. That also speaks to the way it feels a bit young. You had things that were unexplained. In The Green Witch, for example, or in The Dark is Rising, book number 2, there weren't a lot of times when you stopped and went, hang on, that makes no sense. Why don't they do this? Why are they doing that? It all made sense. In The Grey King, you had a lot of things that didn't make sense. It's like after having gone through all that effort to retrieve the harp, Will then hides it in a barn and leaves it there, which, when you know that the Grey King is there and he's a dark master and that he's got all these great grey foxes, Milgrun, I think they were called. Great plot device. Would you leave the harp there? I wouldn't. Will's worried that other people will see him carrying it and he'd have to explain it. Well, explain it. You're a kid. You can explain anything. And you're a dark one. You can change people's memory. So there's a lot of things that Will Stanton, as a old one with magical powers, should be able to do, and he's not. And when other books you have explanations for that, in The Grey King you don't. Now, maybe I'll come across one of those beautiful old puffin covers, reread it and go, hey, that book is great. I was wrong the first time. If so, I'll do another video with heartfelt apologies. So, loved all the Welsh stuff, didn't mind the mythology. The dark versus the light fight was good. The characters of Bran and Will were fine. I don't think this is the best book in the series, though. What can I say? It's still a good book, though. If you're reading the series, read this one. Don't listen to me. enjoy it, come back, tell me I'm wrong, whatever. Read good books.